James Carter sat on the front porch of his small, weather-beaten house, watching the sun sink behind the pine trees that lined the edges of the road. At 70 years old, he moved slower than he used to, but his eyes still carried the sharpness of a soldier who had once walked through rice paddies in Vietnam, scanning for danger. His hands were rough, his back stiff, and his knees ached every time he stood. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the soft sound of his granddaughter's breathing from the bedroom inside. Her name was Alana, 8 years old, full of questions and laughter that could light up a room, until sickness came knocking at their door. It had started with a fever that wouldn't break, then the endless doctor visits. Finally, the diagnosis, an immune condition that required expensive medication to keep her stable. James had faced many battles in his life, but this one humbled him. No weapon, no strategy, no platoon could fight for him here. Just money. And money was the one thing he didn't have. The veteran's pension he received barely covered the bills. He picked up part-time work when he could. Odd jobs, handyman repairs, even mowing lawns for neighbors, who still looked at him with a mix of pity and suspicion. In their small southern town, people remembered who James was, the black man, who had fought for a country that didn't always fight for him. Some saluted him. Others spat on the ground when he passed. The years hadn't erased the old wounds of racism that cut deep in places like these. But James had learned to keep his head high. He'd fought for survival before. He could do it again. Still, when he opened the pill bottles on the kitchen counter and counted what was left, a cold dread crept into his chest. Alana needed another month's supply. The doctor had warned him. Missing doses could set her back in ways that medicine might not fix. James knew what that meant. He couldn't let her down. That night, he sat by her bed, watching her small chest rise and fall. Her curly hair fanned across the pillow, and her tiny hand rested over his. She stirred in her sleep, murmuring, "Grandpa, don't leave." His heart tightened. "I'm not going anywhere, baby girl," he whispered. But deep inside, he wondered how long he could keep that promise. On the far side of the garage sat something that had carried him through decades of storms. His Harley Davidson Softail, black and chrome, polished like it had just rolled off the line. He'd bought it after Vietnam, back when he needed something to outrun his memories. That bike wasn't just steel and rubber. It was freedom. It was every mile of open road he had ever ridden. Every time he'd left pain in the rearview mirror. It was also the one thing of real value he had left. James tried to push the thought away, but it came back stronger each night. The Harley could buy medicine. The Harley could buy time. The Harley could keep Alana alive. He wrestled with the idea for days, pacing the porch, rubbing his aching knees, staring at the bike like it was both salvation and betrayal. What would it say about him to give up the one thing that had carried him all these years? Would it mean the racists in town were right, that a black man like him couldn't hold on to anything he loved without having it ripped away? But then he'd hear Alana's cough, thin and sharp in the middle of the night. He'd see the way her energy drained after only a few steps. And he knew the Harley was just a machine. Alana was flesh, blood, and love. One evening, James called his old war buddy Leon, who lived 2 towns over. Leon picked up on the second ring, his deep voice steady as ever. "James, you sound tired." "I'm all right," James lied. "Listen, I need to ask you something. Do you know anyone looking to buy a Harley?" The silence on the other end was heavy. Finally, Leon spoke. "You sure you want to do that, brother? That bike's been with you longer than anything." James swallowed hard. "I'm sure. My granddaughter needs her medicine. That's all that matters." Leon sighed, a sound filled with years of shared understanding. "I'll put the word out." "But James, this ain't right. A man shouldn't have to give up his pride to keep his family alive." James chuckled bitterly. "Been a black man in this country long enough to know, right don't mean much when you're broke." They talked a little longer, but after hanging up, James sat in the quiet house, staring at the shadows creeping across the floor. His heart felt heavy, like he'd already lost something precious. That night, sleep wouldn't come. He stepped into the garage, flicked on the bare bulb overhead, and let his eyes rest on the Harley. He ran his hand along the handlebars, tracing the memories embedded in every dent and scratch. The road trips with Leon, the rallies where he was always the only black rider, but never the one to back down. The nights he rode alone just to hear the wind, coffee, and gossip. As James parked his truck, he felt their eyes on him through the diner window. He'd been looked at that way all his life, scrutinized, measured, doubted. Today, with the Harley gone, it felt worse. Inside the pharmacy, he set the envelope of cash on the counter. The pharmacist, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, counted the bills without meeting James's eyes. When the bag of medicine slid across the counter, James exhaled slowly, relief washing through him. For now, Alana was safe. But as he turned to leave, he heard a voice behind him. "Well, well, look who's finally crawling in here with money." James didn't have to turn to know it was Carl Jenkins. White in his 40s, always quick with a smirk and a word meant to cut. Carl's family had owned land in this town for generations. James had once fixed Carl's fence for next to nothing, and Carl had still accused him of dragging his feet to milk the job. James kept walking, but Carl followed him out onto the sidewalk, his voice carrying over the rain. "Funny thing, Carter. Heard you sold that bike of yours. Man like you, giving up the only thing that made you worth looking at. What's next? Sell the truck? The house?" The men in the diner had stepped outside now, drawn by the tension. They leaned against the wall, arms crossed, waiting to see if James would snap. James stopped, medicine bag in hand, and turned slowly. His eyes met Carl's, steady, calm. "Don't worry about my business." Carl grinned, stepping closer. "Oh, I'm plenty worried. You see, folks like you think you can ride around like you belong here. Vietnam vet, Harley man, all that glory. But we know better. You ain't nothing without that bike. Just another old black man in a town that don't want you." The words cut, sharper than knives, but James stood tall. He'd faced worse. Bullets, bombs, nights in the jungle with death at his shoulder. He wasn't about to let Carl Jenkins break him. "I got what I need," James said quietly, his voice like gravel. "That's all that matters." Carl's smirk widened. "For now. But I'll tell you something. You can spend every dime you got, sell every piece of pride you own, and that little girl of yours still won't make it. And when she don't, you'll have nothing. Nothing at all." The men from the diner chuckled darkly. The sound made James's blood boil. His fists clenched at his sides. Every muscle in his body screamed to swing, to put Carl on the ground. But then he thought of Alana, her tiny hands, her laughter, her coughs that shook her whole frame. She needed him here, not locked up. So James stepped forward, closing the space between them until he was eye to eye with Carl. His voice was low, steady, dangerous. "You keep my granddaughter's name out your mouth." Carl's grin faltered just for a second. Then he laughed, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Easy there, soldier. No need to get all worked up. Just saying what everyone else is thinking." The others laughed again, but it was nervous now, thinner than before. James held Carl's gaze a moment longer, then turned and walked away. He didn't look back, didn't give them the satisfaction. He climbed into his truck, placed the bag of medicine on the seat beside him, and sat there for a long moment, hands gripping the wheel. His chest burned with anger, humiliation, and grief all tangled together. The Harley was gone. His pride was gone. But Alana had what she needed, and that was the only victory that mattered. Still, as he drove home through the rain, he couldn't shake the image of Carl's smirk, the laughter of the men at the diner, the way this town never let him forget that no matter what he'd sacrificed for his country. For his family, he would always be less in their eyes. When he pulled into the driveway, Alana was waiting on the porch. She jumped down the steps, her face bright with relief when she saw the medicine bag. "You got it, Grandpa," she said, hugging him tight. James closed his eyes and held her, the storm in his chest quieting for a moment. "Yeah, baby girl, I got it." But in the back of his mind, the echoes of Carl's words lingered, poisoning the silence, and he knew this battle was far from over. The house smelled faintly of chicken soup simmering on the stove, but James barely tasted it as he sat at the table with the medicine, spread out in front of him. The small orange bottles seemed almost too simple, too ordinary to hold so much power. Each pill was a lifeline, a chance to keep Alana safe for one more day, one more week. He ran his hand over the labels, double-checking the dosage instructions. He'd read them a dozen times, but it didn't matter. He needed to be sure. One mistake could cost her. From the living room came the sound of cartoons playing softly on the old television. Alana's laughter followed.